In this lesson, I'm going to explain what tritone or flat 5 substitution is. It's a very common substitution used all the time by jazz musicians, which can add a nice harmonic depth to both your comping and your single lines. So let's get into the lesson. Hey everybody, Jamie Holroyd here, helping you learn jazz guitar. Welcome to the channel. In this video, I'm going to be discussing tritone substitution. Now, just before I begin, I'd like to tell you that if you are new to jazz guitar, then I've got a free beginner jazz guitar course which you can enroll in, which is linked and listed below. This has got many 4K videos, free downloadable PDFs, everything you need to get started learning jazz guitar. If you'd like to get the PDF or downloads for any of the material in this lesson, then please check out the link below to my Patreon page. For all the examples in this lesson, we're going to be talking about a 2-5-1 in the key of C. So if you don't know what that is, then we're basically talking about D minor 7, either for a bar or half a bar, G7 for a bar or half a bar, and then C major 7, either for a full bar or for 2 bars. So a long 2-5-1 would sound like this. G7, C major, usually 2 bars, and a short 2-5-1 would be D minor, G7, C. Sometimes you might get a 6 chord thrown in there as well, but that's the basics of a 2-5-1. If you need to know more about that, then I have a course called Practical Theory for the Jazz Guitar Player, which explains all about the 2-5-1. So, tritone substitution. To understand what that is, we're going to be going at this in 2 different ways. I'm going to teach you this from a visualization perspective on the guitar, and I'm also going to talk about this from a more theoretical perspective as well. So either way is fine, it just depends what you want. If you just want the sound, then I'll show you a quick way to get it and a quick way to think about it. But if you're looking for, the more substantial reason, then I'll explain that as well. So just to give everyone the quick and easy explanation, if we take this chord, a G7 chord, G7 shell voicing, where we have the root in the bass and then the 7th on the D string and the 3rd on the G string, this gives us a 3-note G7 chord. The notes are G, F and B. Root, 7, 3. Now what tritone substitution means is the chord which is a flat 5 away from G, so if you need to get your fingers out and go A, B, C, D, you flatten that, so therefore the chord would now be D flat. You play a D flat instead of a G7, like that. So there's a G7, there's a D flat, 7. The principle works, or the substitute works, because the 3rd and the 7th are the same in each chord. As I've said, in G7, you have the 7th, then the 3rd. When you put a D flat bass note on that, you've got the 3rd, then the 7th. It's a very similar sound because the guide tones are the same. You could do the same in a different position of the guitar neck too. So on the PDF you'll see that I've basically written a G7 up here in 10th position, and if you play a D flat 7 there, in 9th position, here's a B and an F now. If you put a G bass note on that, you've got a G7. If you put a D flat bass note on that, you've got a D flat 7. So from a guitar visualization perspective, that's why it works. So what does the term tritone actually mean? Well, tritone just means 3 tones, 3 whole tones. So if we start on the note G, when you go up a tone, it basically means 2 frets on the guitar. So the first tone away from G would be the note A, the next tone away from A would be the note B, and the 3rd tone, the tritone away from G, is the note D flat. So that's what the term tritone substitution means. Or you could think of it as I did before when I said flat and 5th, where you go up to the 5th of the chord and then you just flatten it 5. So root 5th, flatten, and that gives you the root of the D flat 7 chord. So once again, tritone is 3 tones. Start on G. A is 1 tone, B is 2 tones, D flat is 3 tones, or you could think of flat 5 away, and that will give you the tritone sound. So now in this context of a 2-5-1, which we have, we previously had D minor 7, G7, and then C major 7. What we now have is D minor 7, D flat 7, C major, D minor 7, D flat 7, C major 7. So, another way which you can memorize that, or, if you want to use it accessibly in a 2-5-1, is whenever you've got a 2 minor 7 chord, if the root of the 2 minor 7 chord is D, then you just go down a semitone. So you've got D flat 7, which is your tritone, and then a semitone again, and you've got C major 7. And this is why tritone sub is, preferred on 2-5s, sometimes on cycling dominant progressions, is because traditionally the 2-5-1 moves in cycles of fourths, that kind of thing. But tritone goes in semitones, which, semitones and cycles are both strong movements for jazz chord progressions. So I'll play them side by side. I'll play a regular 2-5, then a tritone 2-5, so you can hear the difference. So D minor 7, G7, A7, D flat 7. So, that D flat's got a little bit more crunch, hasn't it? So why is that? Why does the D7 have more crunch? Well, straight away when you get that D flat sound, and this is where it gets a little bit confusing for some people, is, can you do this when if someone else is playing a regular 2-5-1, then can you play a tritone? Well, it's eyes and ears on the bandstand is always key. If you're playing something very slow, like a ballad, it might be harder to get away with. But generally speaking, if a bass player, for example, is just kind of walking around a 2-5-1 in C, and you're still playing tritone chords, 9 times out of 10 that's going to work very well, especially at a fast tempo. There really isn't much difference. So why would you use this sound in a comping perspective? Well, if you play a D flat 7 chord, as I said, the very fact that you've got D flat gives you the flat 5 against the G7 if the piano player or if the bass player is playing that as well, then that will work. But you also, if you add other common intervals to this grip, like a 9th chord, so that's a D flat 9, but that E flat over G7 could then become a flat 13th, which is a really nice, beautiful chord. So you're effectively creating an altered dominant sound, really, by using tritone sub. That's one reason why it's cool. Another way that you could use it, if you weren't sure, is if you were comping, you could go, and you could use it at the very end of the beat. So you could go D minor 7, could still play G7, and then towards the end of the bar, you could maybe just go just a D flat 7, and then you could go to C major 7. So that's another way you could use it. But yeah, generally speaking, jazz musicians like it because it has a little bit more of a crunch to the sound, which, when we get onto single line soloing, you'll find out how effective that can be. But from a comping perspective, what you really need to do is understand this. So first thing to do is make sure you can play it in a couple of positions in the key of C. So D minor 7, D flat 7, C, do the same thing further up the guitar neck. And once you're confident with that, you want to take it to a standard, like maybe something like Autumn Leaves, which, if I just kind of get you started on something like that. Those are the first 4 chords. So 2, 5, 1 in G. If you look at the D7, what would be the tritone sub for a D7 chord? It would be A flat 7, that would be the sound. So we now have this sound. Same thing on the minor 2/5. Sounds pretty nice there, doesn't it? F sharp minor 7 flat 5, F7 and then E minor. To me, that has quite a bluesy sound. So it's a really pretty sound, as you can hear. So your homework, what I would give to you if you were a private student now, would be to pick a standard. It could be autumn leaves, it could be all the things you are. And every time you see a resolving dominant, very clear that it has to be a resolving dominant, generally speaking. If you do it on something like All of Me, where you've got secondary dominants, then it potentially couldn't work as well. Although, of course, All of Me does have both resolving and non-resolving dominants in. So see if you can do that. Once you've done a couple of standards, you'll be able to use it without even really thinking about it. And having this kind of foundation is really key to being successful when it comes to soloing in regards to it. If you want to hear a very cool example of this in jazz repertoire, then I highly recommend the recording of Autumn Leaves by Jim Hall and Ron Carter. There's a duo album that they did together called Alone Together, which is a great album anyway. Every jazz guitar player should check out that record. And at the very end of the A section in Autumn Leaves, there's a wonderful example of tritone substitution there. So I'm not going to tell you too much about what that is. You should have a listen to that and see if you can catch the sound with your own ears and work it out, but I've kind of given you a bit of a clue already. So anyway, I hope that you found this lesson useful. I hope it explains what tritone substitution is. If you have any questions, let me know. But yeah, practice it in all 12 keys and you'll be absolutely fine with this.